In 1 Samuel 14, we read some information about Jonathan, which is a character that, in a lot of ways, many of us are not super familiar with. Jonathan was a very brave man. He's the son of Saul. He's essentially in line to be prince of Israel, even though, the system is not really set up that way, but that's how we think of it. And I have a feeling that's how Saul and Jonathan thought of it also, that he was going to be the prince. But Saul was fighting against the Philistines, and the camps were separated from each other, and Jonathan and his armor bearer go out. Essentially, it looks like to do like some scouting to see what the camp is like. And Jonathan says to his armor bearer in verse 6, let's go over to this garrison of the uncircumcised. It may be that Jehovah will work for us, for nothing can hinder Jehovah from saving by many or by few. I love that so much, don't you? And what an incredible statement of faith in God. And the armor bearer, and this probably tells us a lot about who Jonathan is. The armor bearer says, do all that's in your heart. Do as you wish. I'm with you, heart and soul. He's there. He's ready. He's to go up there. So they make some plans. They come out to fight against the Philistines. And we're told on the first strike when they go against them, Jonathan and his armor bearer killed 20 men. 2 against 20. Those are not good odds in most cases. But clearly Jonathan's faith in Jehovah was justified, because not only did that start the victory over the Philistines in that case, but God also sent the panic in the camp with the earthquaking at that point. And there was a great victory. So we're probably more familiar, though, with David when David fights Goliath, right? And so when David, he's already been anointed to be king, and the Philistines are still being fought now by King Saul. But Goliath is the champion, and he's like 9 feet tall. It's just incredible how big he is. And all the Israelites are completely scared of him. Of course they are. Because what he's doing is he goes out and stands in front of the army and says, just send one warrior out and we'll see who wins. And that'll just win the battle. And Saul didn't go out. And Jonathan didn't go out. And David's brothers didn't go out. Nobody went out. They were just afraid and they didn't do it. And David is so young right now. He's not even a part of that army. His father sends him with food for his brothers, and he sees what's happening. He's not going to put up with it. And he tells King Saul, when he's going to go out to fight Goliath, he says, Jehovah delivered me from the paw of a lion, from the paw of the bear. He'll deliver me out of the hand of the Philistine. And Saul says, God be with you. And he goes. And he challenges the Philistine. You come at me with a sword and with a javelin and with a spear, but I've come in the name of Jehovah, whom you've defied. David understood that this battle wasn't just about nations. It was about the people of Israel trusting in God. And he says to Goliath, this day Jehovah will deliver you into my hand. I'm going to strike you down and cut off your head. Do you remember Goliath's reaction? He kind of laughed. Well, it was a mocking laugh. It wasn't a nice thing that he replied to him at that time. But as David is saying this, he says, the battle is Jehovah's, and he will give me into your hand. What confidence. Doesn't that sound like almost the same as Jonathan? That he would do that. And so we're told that when Goliath rises up to come out to fight him, David went out to meet him also, and it says he ran quickly. And I think that's a really important point, that he just didn't stand back and wait for Goliath to come to him. He ran to the battle. And that's an incredible amount of confidence and faith that he can take on this giant. He ran out to do that. And he did exactly what he had said he would do, not because he said it, but because of what God did. And he cut off Goliath's head. In 1 Samuel 18, actually it's the end of chapter 17 when it tells that story. I want to read with you in verse 55. As soon as Saul saw David go out against the Philistine, he said to Abner, the commander of the army, "Abner, whose son is this youth?" And Abner said, "As your soul lives, O king, I do not know." Oops. Commander of the army, I don't know. Who is this kid? And the king said, "Inquire whose son the boy is." And as soon as David returned from striking down the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul with the head of the Philistine in his hand. And Saul said to him, "Whose son are you, young man?" And David answered, "I am the son of your servant Jesse, the Bethlehemite." As soon as he had finished speaking to Saul, the son of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. I hate that chapter break so much. As soon as he said, what was it that he said at that point that made such a difference? They're knit together in such an incredible way. So Jonathan and David become our example of two people who are knit together in their friendship, in their brotherhood, brothers-in-law, it's eventually in this relationship. Last week, we talked about Cain and Abel, and Cain saying, "Am I my brother's keeper?" And that was kind of to demonstrate to us how easy it is for us to be very individualistic and, I do my own thing. At least on Cain's part. I don't know what Abel was like. All we're told is that, he did a good sacrifice and he died. But most relationships don't devolve to the level of Cain and Abel. Most. But sometimes they get kind of close, don't they? Jonathan and David is kind of the other extreme, isn't it? Where you have two friends who are knit together in that way, that have that brotherhood. And again, most relationships aren't going to achieve that level of companionship. I get that. But what I'd like us to do this morning is, as you consider your relationship with members of this congregation, where do you see your sentiment for them on that scale of Cain and Abel and Jonathan and David? And it's going to be different for each one of us, isn't it? Right? It has to be. It's going to be different. But just start looking around. What's my relationship with you? Where's my relationship with you? I kind of hope that we fall on the positive side of the meh. It's not always true, is it? Do you think that Jesus would have wanted his siblings' relationships with each other to be what you just thought about for us? Or do you think he wants something better for us? And the answer has to be, yeah. It can get better. So, without thinking that all of us need to be at the Jonathan David level, okay? That's just incredible. What do Jonathan and David teach us about how we can grow in our relationships? That's what I want us. For most of us, our relationships sadly revolve around our assemblies. say sadly, but I don't really mean sadly, but I don't have a better word for it. Maybe there's some occasions outside of that. But when we're assembled together like this, most of us are looking at the back of each other's heads, or we've got our heads down in the songbooks. And it's really set up so that you pay attention to me, or the song leader, or the one who's leading the prayer. It's very much one person focused. Could it be better? Do you remember the words of the Hebrew writer in Hebrews, the 3rd chapter, verses 12 through 13? Take care, brothers, lest there be in any of you an evil, unbelieving heart, leading you to fall away from the living God. But exhort one another day by day. That's how the saints met often. And I don't mean necessarily that they met to worship every day, but certainly in Acts 2, what the picture is that they're together, both spiritually, for spiritual things, but also in their houses. They're sharing time together. They got to know each other, exhort each other day by day. I think we can do better. I'm not saying we're bad. I think we can do better. And I think Jonathan and David give us some thoughts towards that. The first thought that I get from Jonathan and David is to be intentional about our relationship. A little bit later, as we talk about the relationship of David and Jonathan, Jonathan's dad Saul is out to kill David. He chucks several spears at David, trying to kill him. And David has to run away. David and Jonathan are separated, but they're still kind of trying to help each other. And at one point, in 1 Samuel, the 20th chapter, and verse 30, when they're eating a meal together, Saul gets very angry at Jonathan. And he says, "You son of a perverse, rebellious woman, do I not know that you've chosen the son of Jesse to your own shame and to the shame of your mother's nakedness?" Those are nasty, harsh words. But the good part of it is where he said, "I know you've chosen him." Jonathan chose to be friends with David. That's intentional. For a lot of us, friendships arise because of proximity. The friends that I played with when I was a child, they were the neighbors that lived a few houses down. There came a time when I was old enough that it was the people in my class, and those became my friends, right? And you become friends with the people just because they're there. Sometimes that's true even here. And Jonathan is teaching us to make it intentional. Let's make the choice that I'm going to be your brother, your sister, your sibling, your friend. I'm going to choose this relationship. Be intentional about it. 1 Samuel 18, verse 1, where it said that part where after David comes back with the head, and it says, as soon as he had finished speaking to Saul, David did, that Jonathan and David's hearts were knit together. What did Jonathan hear from David? As soon as he had said that, at that point, perhaps it was the humility of the reply that he heard. I don't know about you. If I was David, I would be a little bit pumped up about myself. If I had just killed a giant that everyone else in the whole country, all the soldiers, were afraid of, right? There would have wanted to be maybe a little bit of chest beating and I'm awesome and that kind of thinking. But David's reply to the king is, I'm the son of your servant. He doesn't do any of the masculine things. I'm the son of your servant. Is that what Jonathan heard? Yeah, that's part of it. Maybe he'd also seen that trust in Jehovah just like he had expressed when he went out to fight the Philistines. And not just heard it, but the demonstration of it. Jonathan didn't just say, God's with us whether there's few or many. He went and fought the many when there was only two. And David went and fought the giant when it was just him. Remember, David had been chosen by... What was special about David? When Saul was cut off because of his disobedience, what was Samuel's job? Go and find a man after my own heart. Right? That's who I want to be king, a man after my own heart. And Samuel even has to say that to Jesse as they're bringing the sons in to see which one is going to be chosen to be king. And, the first son comes in, and I get the feeling that Jesse's like, yeah, this is the good one, right? So he comes in, and Samuel, nope. And the next one, and the next one, and the next one. Jehovah sees not as a man sees. Man sees the outward appearance, but God sees the heart. Don't you have another son? Yeah, there's a kid out in the fields taking care of the sheep. Bring him in. God chose David because of his heart. I'm convinced Jonathan loved David's heart also. And he chose him. Brethren, we can be better just by intentionally choosing to be the brothers and sisters God intends us to be intentional about it. If you read on in that text in 1 Samuel 18 and verse 4, after they talks about that relationship, Jonathan takes off his robe and gives it to David, along with his armor, his sword, and his bow, and his belt. What has Jonathan just done for David? You remember, what was the words Abner said? So, whose kid is that? I don't know. We have no idea who this is. Jonathan says, I'm giving you all these things. And when he gives him those things, it's not just giving him those things. He's the prince. He's next in line for the throne, and he honors David greatly by giving him all of those things. You take these. That wasn't casual. That was meaningful. Of David saying, not only do I choose you, but I honor you. That's intentional. And I think that's what we kind of need to seek for. 1 Samuel 20, verse 30, going back to that part of the story where they're supposed to be eating meals together and David is scared for his life. 1 Samuel 20 and verse 3, David and Jonathan are talking, and it says, your father knows well that I have found favor in your eyes. You found favor. So that's intentional, isn't it? David knew that Jonathan favored him. We're sometimes kind of scared of that idea of favoring, because favoring means not just I accept you, but I have a preference for you, right? Jonathan preferred to be with David. It was so clear that Saul recognized it. They made the choice to be together, to do together, to work together. It was intentional. Let's be intentional about being brothers and sisters. Second point, be faithful. Again, 1 Samuel 18, verse 3, after their hearts are knit together, it says in that passage that Jonathan made a covenant with David and he loved him as his own soul. He makes a covenant. That mention is 3 more times that they made a covenant together. They rely on that covenant. Now, the problem that we have sometimes is when we hear covenant, we think of it very much in terms of a covenant between God and us, right? That's not wrong. It's an agreement, right, that we make. It's more than agreement. It's a picture of a friendship. We think of it sometimes when it comes to weddings, right? That a man and a woman will make a covenant with each other to share their lives. But here we have two people who are choosing to say, we're in this together. We're inseparable. We've chosen each other. And they make this covenant 3 times, over and over. And they depend on that. So if you go to 1 Samuel 20 and verse 8, back to that horrible meal that they were having together, David says to Jonathan, therefore deal kindly with your servant, for you brought your servant into a covenant of Jehovah with you. There's 2 parts about that statement that I like very much. One, the covenant wasn't just, okay, when I was a kid, some people, not me, used to do the blood brothers thing. You know, you cut yourself in the palm and you smack your hands. Ooh, we're blood brothers. Gross. Never could do that. Okay, I have a little problem with blood. And they thought that was like special. That was the way of showing that pact that they had together. David and Jonathan's covenant, we're told in this passage, is before Jehovah. It's not a covenant they took lightly. It's a covenant that was a spiritual agreement between them and before Jehovah. And the second thing that I like about that passage is not just that they saw their friendships in a conjunction with their relationship with God, but he also says, deal kindly with your servant. Do you hear the humility again? And that plea to deal kindly. That's the idea of a covenant, isn't it? That preference, that showing the favor that we talked about earlier, and the dealing kindly with each other. David's on his running for his life. And I think the way that we see that most clearly is what Jonathan's reply to David is in 1 Samuel 20 and verse 4. Jonathan said to David, whatever you say, I will do for you. Have you ever said those words to anyone? Whatever you say, I will do to you. There's some scary parts of saying something like that. Like, what if they ask me to give them everything? Do I really mean it, right? What if they ask me to do something wrong? Would I have to do it? But if you're in a friendship like Jonathan to David, they're not going to ask each other to do something wrong. They didn't have to worry about that. They weren't going to hurt each other. Whatever you say, I'm in this with you. Do you hear the faithfulness of that statement in the covenant? Whatever you say, I will do for you. And again, when that time comes, Jonathan does. It plays out exactly that way. The reason he was saying this is because David was running for his life. Literally. There's not a step between me and Saul trying to kill him. And there's actually part of the text, if you go to the story, where that was practically literally true. There was a step between Saul and David. Saul could have killed him. Whatever you say, I'm going to do. Can we have better relationships with each other when we can depend on each other? I may not be able to say to every one of you, whatever you ask. That's Connie. But, man, if I can help you, I want to help you. And how much better does that make our relationships when we know we can depend on each other when we need help? Third thing, love. Did you notice in 1 Samuel 18, verse 1, when it talks about their hearts being knit together, the end of 18, verse 1 says, Jonathan loved him as his own soul. And in 18, verse 3, that's repeated. He loved him as his own soul. And in 20, verse 17, it says of David that he loved Jonathan as he loved his own soul. How close are we to that with each other? Again, this is one of those things where I want to remind us, I'm not trying to set us up for failure. I'm not trying to set us up and say every one of us have to say, I love you as I love my own soul. That's rare. It's very special. It's very great. If you get to have that kind of friendship and relationship, good. Clearly. But do we even come close? Can we do better about loving each other the way that Jonathan and David did? And so let's go to the 19th chapter, verse 1. 1 Samuel 19, verse 1. It says, And Saul spoke to Jonathan his son and to all of his servants that they should kill David. But Jonathan, Saul's son, delighted much in David. And that's what I like to hear. That first one of loving each other as our own soul, good, hard. Delighting in each other, that's beautiful. I want to spend time with you. The context of this is kind of scary, right? You should go kill him. How do you have any desire to kill someone that you delight in? Clearly, Jonathan wasn't going to do that. But I love the picture of the relationship that they delighted in each other. And so if you go to 1 Samuel 20, verses 14 and 15, more of the conversation between David and Jonathan. And David says, If I'm still alive, show me the steadfast love of Jehovah. Now this is elevating the love, isn't it? This is the covenant love that's so talked about. The idea of a mutual benefit. I'm always going to do what's best for you. Show me the steadfast love of Jehovah, that I might not die, and do not cut off your steadfast love from my house forever. When Jehovah cuts off every one of the enemies of David from the face of the earth. Steadfast love, and don't let it stop forever. When you think about that statement, that's David saying it to Jonathan. Did it hold up? Jonathan actually dies before David. But what does David do for Jonathan's family? He goes and he finds the surviving son, Mephibosheth, or however you say it, and he takes care of him. Their love was so great that it extended in a circle beyond just themselves and out to everyone. It wasn't a selfish love. It wasn't just between them. It was a love that expanded. That's the kind of love we need to have as brothers and sisters in Christ. And we see that when they part a little bit later. In 1 Samuel 20 and verse 41, we see how much they cared for each other. When they're parting, it says they kissed each other, they wept with one another, David weeping the most. When they had to be separated, it tore them up. In part, because Jonathan knew and David knew it might be the last time. Saul was seriously trying to kill David. They really cared for each other. We need love like that. And the last one is the most obvious, that we need to be knit together. Now, the idea of this word knit, some of your Bibles might have the idea of tying together, something being bound together. So their hearts, it says the soul of Jonathan and soul of David, who they are is tied up together with each other. That's the kind of relationship that they had. And this is something I think we can seek after. I think the closest maybe we come to that, we sing about it sometimes. because blessed be the tie that binds, right? That's the idea of this. But I'm talking too long, we won't get to sing it. You're saved. But that's the idea. Blessed be the tie that binds us together in Christian love. That's a beautiful picture of that. Now, that knitting together is amazing. If you go to 1 Samuel 19 and in verse 4. This is when, again, Saul is trying to kill David. And it says, and Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul his father and said to him, let not the king sin against his servant David, because he has not sinned against you, and because his deeds have brought good to you. This is a pretty simple one, but being knit together means that I'm going to talk good about you to others. I'm going to let other people know how great you are. Again, sometimes we're uncomfortable with that, but maybe we shouldn't be. Because if you put it in the other direction, if sometimes one of our brothers or sisters is maybe not doing exactly what we think they should be doing, what do we tend to do? Gossip, slander, talk bad about them. That comes a lot easier to us than building each other up, especially in the eyes of others. And how brave was Jonathan to do this for David? His father's out to kill him, and he speaks favorably of David. Don't do this. He stands up for him. You see the covenant. You see that heart being knit together, that he was willing to do that. Are our hearts knit together like that, where we speak well of each other, even in difficult situations, where we build each other up? In 1 Samuel 20 and verse 13, again, when Jonathan is talking about what Saul is doing, trying to kill David, Jonathan did everything that he could in verse 13 to say, I want you to be able to go in safety. He put himself in danger so that he could keep his brother safe. And then I want you to look with me at chapter 20, beginning in verse 30. So this first part of this verse is going to sound very, very familiar. Then Saul's anger was kindled against Jonathan. He said to him, you son of a perverse, rebellious woman, do I not know that you've chosen the son of Jesse to your own shame and for the shame of your mother's nakedness? For as long as the son of Jesse lives on the earth, neither you nor your kingdom shall be established. Therefore, send and bring him to me, for he shall surely die. We're just going to stop there right now. Saul looks at David with jealousy that Jonathan never did. Jonathan didn't see David as competition. Saul does. And Jonathan wasn't going to not be king because of David. He was not going to get to be king because of his father. Verse 32. Then Jonathan answered his father, why should he be put to death? What has he done? But Saul hurled his spear at him to strike him. So Jonathan knew that his father was determined to put David to death. And Jonathan arose from the table in fierce anger and ate no food the second day of the month, for he was grieved for David because his father had disgraced him. This is Jonathan standing up for his brother David. He got a spear thrown at him for standing up for his brother. Why should he die? He's trying to talk reason to someone who's unreasonable, and yet he still stands for him. And he's angry, fierce anger. That's how knit together they were. When Saul insulted David, it hurt Jonathan. Their souls were knit together in that way. And brethren, we need to feel that way about each other. That we are knit together in that way. The last passage that I want to bring up is in 1 Samuel 23. This is while he's on the run again. Jonathan is trying to comfort David. And in verses 16 through 18, they get to meet together. And because of the covenant with him, we're told in verse 16, and Jonathan, Saul's son, rose and went to David at Horesh and strengthened his hand in God. And he said to him, do not fear, for the hand of Saul my father shall not find you. You shall be king over Israel, and I shall be next to you. Saul my father also knows this. And the two of them made a covenant before Jehovah. David remained at Horesh, and Jonathan went home. He strengthened his hand in God. And he did it by saying, we know what's going to happen, and it didn't matter. But he strengthened him. They were knit together. We can do that for each other. But we're not going to be doing it as long as all we do is spend time sitting in pews looking at the back of each other's heads. I'm not saying anything except it takes more. And are we willing to give that more? Please understand that this lesson is not saying that we can only have friendships or relationships with siblings in the church. I'm not trying to say that there's anything wrong with outside relationships. This should be a reminder that we can have deeper relationships with each other. And we should seek opportunities to grow closer because we're family. Our brother became one of us so that we could be like him. And because we're like him, we're heirs together and brothers together with Christ. And let's be the kind of brothers that he wants us to be. Let brotherly love continue. If there's one here today who believes that Jesus is the Christ, or you need our prayers and help, if you believe and you're ready to be baptized, it's ready. If you need our prayers and help, please let us know. Come forward as we stand and sing.